record. Okay, so everybody here knows me, but I'm going to record it in case somebody misses it, and then I can send it to them after. So as many of you know, I'm a registered nurse, but not everybody knows that I've been a burnout recovery coach. Finished my training in January, so that's 10 months now. Okay, so this workshop is from Burnout to Badass, which is a program that I've been doing at Hamilton Health Sciences, and then one-to-one coaching. So I'm going to start with basically talking about my story, and then we're going to go into what burnout is, why it's becoming such a big problem in healthcare, how our brains basically interpret burnout, and then some tips for resiliency. If you have any questions throughout, don't hesitate to ask. I can't see the question, like the chat bar with while I'm sharing my screen, but you can unmute yourself and then, oh, I can open it up. Never mind, I can open up the chat bar. Or just put in the questions in the chat. Yeah. So basically, my story with how I came to be a burnout coach was burnout within myself. So basically, within the first 6 months or so of my nursing career, I was working with NRT and constantly floating to different units, which has some benefits, like not getting bored because you go to constantly different units and not having to deal with floor politics. But as a fairly extroverted person, not having a solid base and kind of work friends was difficult. And I also really struggled with, because going to all these different floors, unfortunately, they were kind of burnt out on the floors. So they tend to give you the difficult patients that have been there forever. So basically every floor I was going to, I was getting the difficult patients. And I found it was very emotionally and physically heavy and exhausting. And I didn't really notice any changes until there was kind of a pivotal point for me. So what happened was I was working on a floor. I was charge nurse as a float nurse, so on a floor I hadn't been to that many times. I had 7 patients, and 2 of them were palliative patients. So in charge of the floor, had like the ER calling, lots of things that I had no idea how to deal with because I hadn't worked on that floor many times. I had these 2 palliative care patients. And within the first few hours of that shift, the one patient passed away, and their family was there like mourning the loss of their loved one. And I remember just like being in that room and being like, I can't deal with this. And I thought it was just like so horrible that I felt like I had to leave that room because I just could not emotionally deal with them needing support from me. And the family was asking me all kinds of questions about what the next steps were. And like all I could think of was like, I just got to get out of this room. I do not have time to deal with this. I have so much stuff. Like I was just so overwhelmed, and I felt like that was just like too much on top of my plate. And then a couple hours later, that second palliative patient I had passed away. And the same thing happened, except for that time it was like even worse. Like all I wanted to do was like throw a box of tissues at them and like run. And it was horrible because that's not me at all. And I'm generally a very supportive and empathetic person. And I like to be that resource person. And when this was occurring, it was like, holy shit, I don't even recognize myself. And that was kind of the wake up call, because it was like, this is not good. This is not who I want to be. And I really had gone into nursing like many of people because they liked helping people, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted, but I knew I liked to help people. So I had lost sight of that. And when that specific shift kind of was that pivotal point, being like, okay, something's got to change. So I kind of went on this whole like journey to figure out what I was supposed to do, because I don't really know what was wrong, but clearly something was not I was not myself anymore. So I hired a personal trainer and spent ridiculous amounts of money on that. I had, joined a couple of different programs and clubs and things, and I had some improvements, but the only thing that really actually did change things was working with a coach and learning to manage my mind in the life coaching aspect. And one thing is, I stayed with NRT for another year and a half after that, but I learned how to actually love my job by changing my brain, not the job. So I was still going to all these floors, getting, the quote unquote difficult patients assignments and the really physically heavy. I was going and, wasn't being with people that I knew, but because my brain had changed, I was able to enjoy it more, and I was better able to make new friends and get more out of it. And since then, I have changed into the cardiac ICU, but I was able to do that decision and make that decision because I wanted to. It wasn't because I was running away from a job that I didn't like. So I want to be really clear, and I'll probably talk more about job hopping later on in this, but really learning to manage your mind and deal with the emotional state changes everything. And that's something that we were never really taught in nursing. Most people weren't taught it in life at all, but our brains are so incredibly powerful, and I feel like we don't use them to the full capacity. So now, what is burnout? So by definition, it's basically a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion from prolonged exposure to stress. So this is pretty much all of healthcare. We are constantly exposed to people at their worst, people who are sick, people who are dying. We see lots of trauma, like literal trauma, emotional trauma. We are constantly seeing this and being bombarded with it, and in a very high stress demanding environment where it's leading us to take action. And now we're in this continued pandemic state now that we've been in it for months and months, but we're constantly being bombarded with all this stressful stimuli. So it's at work, we've changed all these policies to be prepared for a pandemic wave if it were to come. We're constantly bombarded from the news, from people around. Like, I feel like I just talk to people now, and everybody is so stressed and worried. So this constant stress actually releases lots of hormones in our body, and our body is constantly in this fight or flight mode. So your body is just freaking out all of the time. And that really does wear down your body, and it causes a whole whackload of problems physically and mentally from this prolonged stress. So a little bit of stress is good. Generally, a lot of us like a little bit of stress because it kind of motivates us to get things done. But actually, through coaching and just personal experience, when I'm in a calm mindset, I am so much better prepared to be able to deal with things, specifically at work. When we're in an emotional brain, when we're overwhelmed, when we're filled with all this negative emotion, we're not thinking logically. And when you are in a critical situation, especially as healthcare providers, you really need to be able to think logically to help save lives. So getting yourself out of the high stress and burnout, if you're in a state of burnout, or preventing it if you're not in a state of burnout, is critical for us to be the best healthcare professionals that we can be. And the last thing on this slide I just want to comment on is that burnout is different than depression. Although they can go together, they are two separate things. So what are the symptoms of burnout? I mean, most people, if I say, what do you think is an experience of burnout? There's a whole whack load of things, but I tend to put it into 3 categories, and that just kind of makes it easy. So number 1 is emotional exhaustion. So just like the figure in this last slide here, where this guy's battery is going down to 0, that is basically, in that shift that I talked about, where I had no energy left to give. I could not deal with that extra additional emotional stress, but just the additional stress. And this is kind of where you see temper tantrums happen. When you see like a grown-ass adult having a full-blown temper tantrum, this is generally when they are in the state of emotional exhaustion. They are like, their battery is completely depleted, they have nothing left to give, and anything additional will just like lead to a meltdown. I sadly witnessed this last week where somebody was very unhappy and had no energy left to give, and I witnessed a physician punching a wall. So it's a huge thing that's still very prevalent, but it seems to be hidden more than it used to be, which is good, but it's still a major issue. The next thing is compassion fatigue. I think this is one that is the most commonly talked about when it comes to burnout. And I've actually had people be like, oh, don't call it burnout, that's too harsh, call it compassion fatigue. And I think that it's okay that burnout's term can be a little bit harsh, because it is harsh. It's not a good thing. We don't want to like downplay it. But compassion fatigue is a part of that. So that is the like inability to empathize or have compassion. And this happens a lot of the time, not necessarily, you don't notice it at work, although sometimes you do. And like my situation, I did. But a lot of the times, like if it's like a family member, a friend, a spouse, or whatever is coming to you, like if your best friend comes to you and says like they're so upset, they just, had this situation, oh, maybe they like went through a breakup or something, and if you feel like you just cannot handle their problems right now because you have enough of your own, that is compassion fatigue. Like if that is pure compassion fatigue, you cannot handle anybody else's problems, you're barely handling your own. And the last one, which I think is the least talked about, the most sneaky, is feelings of lack of personal accomplishment. So this is basically where we lose sight of our own accomplishments. And in healthcare, a lot of the times, this is where people don't realize the impact of their work. As healthcare professionals, we get to impact so many lives. Like we're at their most critical points, we're helping all of these people, and most healthcare professionals are not really taking that in. Like we don't recognize the fact that we are saving lives. And I think it's so incredibly important to just take time to appreciate that. And even if it's just like, helping somebody walk for the first time after surgery, that's a big point in their life. And most of us are just like, oh, it's just another day at the office, like brushing it off. But it's so important to recognize and have some gratitude for that experience, so we get to take part of. Because when you don't recognize that, you don't feel that your work has value. And when you don't feel that your work has value, we start to really have a lot of self-doubt and wonder whether this is the right profession, if we should change jobs, if we should do something else to go somewhere where we are more valued. But I think the most important thing is realizing that we can create our own self-worth and our own self-value, and going about doing that for ourselves. Because unfortunately, a lot of the time, we are not recognized by the hospital, the management, and whatnot. So creating that within ourselves, and then also creating that for your coworkers. So just going to talk about some various studies that I found. Unfortunately, most of the data is all based on physician burnouts, but there is some nursing and allied health data, but most of it is based on physicians because they tend to have more funding. So in a study done by Pfefferling, he estimates that 80% of physicians will experience some burnout at some point in their careers. And some of the other research I found is very similar for nursing, that 80% will have burnout at some point in their careers. And that's huge, because that's like almost everybody is going to experience burnout at least at some point. Another one, burnt out physicians are more likely to commit medical errors, have higher rates of turnover rates and absenteeism. And I know that it's very similar for nursing staff, and that's definitely something that we have probably all witnessed, is that a lot of people are taking lots of mental health days, just can't deal with it, and they're calling in sick a lot. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with taking that time for self-care, but it's clearly a problem when there's so many people who are requiring these days. This Jail Mabin study is really interesting. So she basically did a longitudinal study. So she followed a group of nursing students from their 4th year into the first 2 years of their nursing professions, and found that like when nursing students finished university, they had like very high ideals and really had like great hopes and aspirations, and really had all of these like great ideas for change within healthcare. And within 2 years of the nursing profession, basically all of those were like slashed away with the harsh realities of healthcare. A lot of them kind of were in states of burnout. They had lost their idealism. And there was even a good proportion, I think it was like 5%, actually left the nursing profession altogether. Like that's huge. Like they were within 2 years of being a nurse, they were already so burnt out and had lost that sense of satisfaction that they had left the profession. Another one, which is 50 Veterans Association hospitals in the States, found that 86% of nurses and 46% of doctors had reported witnessing senior staff tantrums. So, as I had talked about already, it's a big deal. And having poor teamwork causes higher rates of negativity and burnout and higher workloads, because when more people are calling in sick and nobody wants to come in for overtime, it causes more problems. So why was compassion lost? So it's interesting because actually when I was doing all this background research, there were some studies that were from like the 1960s talking about increased burnout, and a lot of it was associated to task-based nursing care. So because even in the 1960s, we were already moving away from this personal care and going towards task-based care. And a lot of critical care nursing has gone back to this critical care, like critical thinking. But task-based nursing and medical profession is still so common. Even though in 1960s, they already knew that it was increasing burnout, we clearly did not get that message. So compassion could be lost from higher work pace. We are expected to do so much more and at such a faster pace than previous generations of nursing and healthcare profession in general. There's so many more interventions and so much more that we're doing, which is amazing for technology, but it does change the ability for us to actually connect and get down to the problem. A lot of time, our medical care has just kind of turned to, you come in with some abdo pain, we're going to send you for a CT test and we're going to do some blood work. And a lot of the time we have all these frequent flyers who are coming back to the ER and coming back and getting admitted because they know all of the exact same words, all of the right words to do to get in, when really there's not generally something physically wrong, but they're lonely, they're, emotionally, they have things that they need that they're not, needs that are not getting met. And so they keep coming back and they keep getting brushed aside, and we're not connecting. And a lot of the time we're not seeing the real issue, or maybe if we are seeing the real issue, we don't have the time to actually deal with it, and it kind of gets brushed aside, and then next Tuesday they're back again. So a lot of this is we're, kind of on this repeat cycle that's really not going anywhere and not really helping anyone, because we're just, running tests and nobody has time to see the person as a whole. A lot of it's peer pressure. There is a lot of culture of this is the way we've always done it. And a lot of the times resistance to change, because it's so busy already. When you want to change that order form or you want to change the process, it takes so many sign-offs and checks and approvals and committee meetings. And then when we try to implement it, things don't go the way we want to, and there's resistance, and things don't generally change because there's not a mass acceptance of this. Like nobody, a lot of people at the times, it's not seeing the value. Like in the ICU, we just got all these new beds, which we weren't told how to use, and we were boosting the patients, and the whole mattress moves with the patient. So we were all bitching and complaining that these beds are like the worst thing ever. And then after we've had them for like almost a year, they come and do an in-service and tell us we've been using them wrong the whole time. And then we find out that there's a right way to use them, and you have these locks on the bottom of the beds that we're supposed to put in so that the mattress stays and the patient gets boosted without the mattress. And a lot of the times that's what happens, is these things are put in because they're great ideas, but nobody takes the time to show us how to use it. So we are incorrectly using the equipment because we haven't been educated. And then they wonder why we don't like change. So that's what happens on the grand scheme of trying to implement things. So awareness is huge. So we're going to talk about how our brain works. So this is more the mental health and coaching side. So you have a frontal cortex brain, and you have a kind of like back brain, which is your primitive brain. So when we are interpreting our world, the brain that we're using to think and consciously choose things is not the brain that's always making decisions, and especially when it comes to stress and keeping us safe. Our primitive brain is the one that's generally responding to those triggers. And our primitive brain is always going to reject or try to protect you from the unknown. So when new things, when change happens, when you're interpreting something, you know, when you have a patient that's going, you know, down south, like going south, they're going, like things are getting bad, your primitive brain is going to freak out. That is like the fight or flight response. And your brain is going to freak out because the only thing it knows is it's trying to protect you. And your brain was designed back when we lived in caveman times, when we were hunter-gatherers. We lived as a group. We did not want to be rejected from our group because that meant death. And the real threats were like lions and tigers and bears, oh my, because they were going to kill you. So our brain still interprets threats like lions, tigers, bears, oh my, and you have to be part of the tribe, or if you're rejected from the tribe, you're going to die. So it's completely normal for your brain to react this way, but a lot of us aren't aware of it. So we get into this state of overwhelm and freak out, and because our brain is reacting this way. So when situations like your patient getting worse, your brain is literally, you know, going into overdrive. You have your fight or flight, you have all of these hormones released, and it's causing your brain to freak out. And those thoughts like, oh crap, my patient's gonna die, creates emotions within your body. So when your brain has thoughts, it sends signals to your body, which creates emotions. And emotions are basically just sensations in your body. So your nervous tract and all this will cause panic. So you might get a tightness in your chest, or nervousness, or sweat, or, you know, you're going to have a hot flash, you're going to turn bright red, you're going to start sweating because your brain is thinking this thought like, oh shit, my patient's going to die. So now I'm having this fear, panic, which is creating this emotion. So this is how your brain is responding. So this is the thing. It works pretty like okay in this situation where your patient's crashing because you need to be responding. But the problem is when you are coming from high emotions, you are low intelligence. So when your brain is at high emotional peak, you're not thinking logically, and you're not able to serve your patient the best. So so this is so important to know, to be able to recognize when that's happening. So I kind of already talked about this earlier. Why do people want to job hop? I think it's really common in nursing when people don't like their work, when people don't like the unit they're in, they don't like the people, and a lot of the people get very, yes, Rhea, the grass is always greener on the other side. Exactly. So people think that if they go somewhere else, it's going to be better than where they are. But I have some news for you. Wherever you go, your brain goes with you. So our brains are creating your experience of the world. So if I went to the same floor as Rhea or Carrie, like, we are going to have different experiences. Even if we work with the same people, we have the same patients, we are going to interpret it differently. So you need to figure out how you are interpreting where you are and the thoughts that you're having about where you are. And most of the time it's like, I hate my coworkers. They always give me the worst assignment. My patients are so difficult. They never listen to me. If only I ever, if only I had the computer that works. I always grab the computer that's broken. Like, a lot of us get into this whole like negative spiral where we like circle the drain and think like, poor, pitiful me. And a lot of the times we don't even realize that we're doing this, but this is kind of what our brain goes. It goes on this like negative spiral. And then we're like, oh, but Jana's over there working and she seems to like it, so maybe I should try moving over there. I might like it more. And sometimes when you move somewhere else, you might like it for a little bit because you just changed your environment, but those thoughts are always going to come back. So I always try to basically become like, get yourself aware of what thoughts you're having. Like, is going somewhere else actually going to change your thoughts? You can decide that you want to love where you're working right now, or you want to decide that you are going to learn, X number of lessons before you go somewhere else. And then you get to, you can go somewhere else because you want to, not because you're trying to escape from the negative emotion, because going somewhere else trying to escape from negative emotion is not going to fix the negative emotion. It's just going to come with you. And that is something that I like really want to stress, because I've coached with so many people and I've worked and seen it where people go elsewhere and then they just keep job hopping to try to like make themselves feel better. But that's not going to help if you take your brain with you, which I hope that all of us take our brains with us when we go somewhere. So now I have a burnout quiz, which is basically a burnout assessment. I'm going to post it in the chat. You can do it now, or if there's any questions, it should be in the follow-up email though as well. So if you don't want to do it now, that's fine. Any questions so far? Okay. Hi, Krista. I just saw that you were waiting. I hope you were not waiting long. Okay. So does anybody need more time for the quiz? Sorry, Krista, I didn't realize you were trying to get in.
It's okay, no worries.
So basically I was talking about like how our brain interprets burnout. I can send you like the video link to watch the first half, and then I'm going to go into resiliency tips next. So I'm going to go back to sharing. Uh-oh, where did my screen? Of course it's now. 1 second, sorry. More technical issues. Now it doesn't want me to. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, no, let me figure out how to open the chat again. Okay, somebody comments. Alrighty. So I'm going to just talk about like what resiliency is. So resiliency is basically your ability to fall and get back up repeatedly. Like the easiest way to explain it is your ability to keep failing and keep getting up. And this is really just a instinct of like mind over matter. So we all have the same circumstances. You get to choose how to determine how you're going to respond to them. So if we each fall, you can decide that's it. I'm going to stay on the ground forever and I'm done with it. Or you can decide I'm going to learn from this and get back up and keep on continuing. And resiliency is so important for recovery from burnout, and it's kind of the opposite of burnout, is being resilient. But also in healthcare, in order to be like a really good healthcare professional, we have to learn from our mistakes. We have to learn and keep growing and become resilient. And a lot of us, like we all have patient experiences that did not go as we planned. We have people die. We have all of this, and being able to interpret that, learn what went well, what didn't go well, what am I going to do differently, is really about growing your resiliency. And a lot of that is, consciously choosing that. But in order to increase resiliency, a lot of that is filling up that battery. So at the beginning with my little graphic with the guy and his battery is dying, I like to talk about self-care is basically you are recharging your battery. You're like a phone battery. You have to continue to recharge yourself. Like if you cannot just like run until zero, and if you're at zero, you have to recharge. You can't just keep going on a negative balance. And the more that you fill your own battery, the more that you're able to help others and increase your resiliency. So I'm just going to talk about. So the first slide is basically all of the things that you should be doing, but most of us are not. So they're easy to do, they're easy not to do. So sleep. The World Health Organization recommends that we get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. How many of you are actually getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep? Or not like 11, because I know a lot of people who get like 11 hours of sleep, and that's a bit much. So it's kind of different with healthcare providers, because especially if we're doing shift work, which I think like everybody on this call is all shift workers. So switching over, it's really important to create sleep routines. I hope you enjoyed your nap. So, it's really important for our brains to create sleep routines, because we are creatures of habits, and our brains use triggers and cues to like decide the next behavior. So when your brain, like maybe, I don't know, you brush your teeth at bedtime, your brain is like, this cue means that we're going to bed soon. So your brain creates those habits and will create the next cue based on that. So creating really good sleep routines will help you get a better sleep, because your brain is used to that. And that is the same, keeping the same routine when you're doing like regular people time or when you're sleeping in the middle of the day is important, because it's going to help you sleep more soundly and get to that sleep more. So if you have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep because your brain is racing, whatnot, falling asleep during the day, especially for that, is really good. Blackout curtains, tricking your brain into thinking it's nighttime. Not watching TV right before sleep. A lot of that is like really stimulating, and your brain creates thinks that's awake time. Doing like a meditation or just like relaxing, reading a book, something like that you can get in the habit of doing consistently, even stuff like aromatherapy with lavender, a lot of people like that, getting your brain in that routine. Next is exercise. 30 minutes, 5 days a week, get your 150 is the recommended amount of exercise. And if you don't exercise at all, just going for a walk around the block is increasing your anaerobic or your aerobic activity, increases your amount of dopamine, your happy hormones, and or endorphins, so that you have better mood. 30 minutes of exercise daily was actually found to be as effective as taking low-dose antidepressants. So exercise does huge amounts on our mood. And if like that's any kind of exercise you want, it's just about getting active. Staying hydrated. I think this is a huge, I don't know what it is, but a lot of nurses do not drink water. I've ran into so many nurses who don't drink water, and I think it's because they don't like to, have to pee, and if they're really busy, they can't pee. But water helps you think clearly. Water is like one of the biggest compounds in our body, because it actually, and it's really important because it takes nutrients into your cells and toxins out of your cells. So if you are not drinking enough water, then you have lots of toxins and stuff built up in your body, and especially in your brain is not functioning as well. So honestly, me, like I get like, if I'm like very dehydrated, I have headaches, like I can't think clearly, and I really notice the change. But if you're not used to drinking a lot regularly, you kind of get more used to it. But it is so important to drink enough water for your brain to think efficiently. So it's going to be better for your health overall because, less wrinkles and things like that, but you're going to be smarter if you drink more water. So keep drinking water. Proper nutrition. It's so important to fuel your body with proper nutrition. I tend to meal prep, which I find works really well as a shift worker and saves lots of time. So the day before my shifts, I make all of my meals for my whole shift, and then I don't have to think about it, and I don't have to go to the cafe and buy random junk food that isn't even that good. If I want to buy junk food, I want it to be tasty, so I don't want it just because I was lazy. Proper nutrition, I think the easiest one, like recommendation, is when you have like a plate. Think about half of your plate being veggies, a quarter of your plate being protein, and then a quarter of your plate being carbohydrates. It is like the easiest healthy eating starting plan. Could talk about nutrition for a long time, but that's like your easy cheat sheet to nutrition. So these are the, I think, like less commonly talked about, but I think so important because I've already talked about it many times, is your brain. You have the power to choose. Your brain interprets everything in your life. Getting and being able to control your brain, what you're thinking. You have the power to decide the thoughts you're having. You have the power to interpret your world and your environment. So pretty much everything is in the power of your brain. So feelings, it is so important, and most of us do not feel our feelings. A lot of us kind of tend to just push away emotions. We don't fully experience them. A lot of that leads to buffering them away with emotional eating. Drinking alcohol is a very easy way to buffer away emotions. The amount of times that I've heard a nurse say, like, after a busy, crazy day, like, after today, I deserve a bottle of wine, which, I mean, it's fine to celebrate, but it's not generally the healthiest technique to remove the negative emotion that you're feeling. So really just practicing feeling, as your emotions are just a sensation in your body that's created by a thought. So your brain has a thought, your brain will then interpret it and send it to your body, and your body will have a physical reaction. And it's really all feelings are. So practicing feeling things is huge, because a lot of us don't spend any time feeling things. And good things, negative things, we're always moving on to the next thing. We just push them away. And a lot of the time when we push emotions away, it's kind of like you're pushing a beach ball under the surface of the pool. Like, you are pushing it down, and the harder and harder you push it down, the harder it's going to come back and smack you in the face when you least expect it. So being able to feel your emotions is a huge skill, because as I talked about before, when you are in your emotional brain, when you have a patient that's crashing, if you're in an emotional brain place, you are not being able to think logically. So being able to feel those emotions and then let it settle and move on is huge, because it's not taking all of your brain power, because a lot of us are taking so much brain power trying to avoid feeling. So how do we feel? You basically just sit for a moment, take a few deep breaths, and just take note of what is going on in your body. So if something's coming up and you're having all of these thoughts going crazy through your brain, just take a minute, take a few breaths, and if there was like an alien that just came down to Earth and had no idea what an emotion was, try to describe to the alien what you were experiencing in your body. And just sit with that for a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, a minute, and it tends to kind of ease and go away. Like some hard emotions will be there for longer, but you can kind of get comfortable with them. And when you do that, they're no longer controlling you, and you're no longer trying to have to push them away and, buffer them away. You can then be like, okay, this is fine. I'm okay with feeling that, but I'm going to consciously choose to feel something else, because you can choose a new thought to create a new emotion in your body. That's you can choose how you want to feel. But when you're avoiding it, it doesn't tend to go away on its own. You got to deal with it first, and then you can choose something new to think. So one of those things is compassion. I think it's so important to experience compassion for ourselves. A lot of that in the symptom of lack of personal accomplishment is taking the time to feel compassion for ourselves, the hard work that we're doing, and then also compassion for your coworkers, your family. Take the time to appreciate when somebody helps you. Like if somebody helps you during the day, have some compassion. If somebody else needs help, have compassion on your patients' family who are going through difficult situations. You can have empathy and compassion, and it's actually feels really good when you do it from an authentic place. When you're doing it, like when you're so busy and you're like, oh, I have to give them the Kleenex box, and okay, I got to get rid of that. It doesn't feel good because it's not authentic. But when you are actually in a place of being able to have enough energy in yourself, your phone battery is like at 100%, you're like, I can give compassion to someone else. And that feels amazing, because as humans, we love to give. Like our brains actually, when they've also done studies, we get more happy hormones released when we give than when we receive. So when you are giving compassion, when you are appreciating your coworkers, when you are being compassionate to your patients, that feels good. And it also helps us feel like we are accomplishing more. So it's actually really good for you to be compassionate to others and yourself. And sometimes it's often harder to be compassionate to ourselves, which is why we have to practice it even more. Gratitude, taking some time to appreciate. If I've had like a really shitty work day, sometimes you just want to go home and be miserable, but taking like 5 minutes to be like, okay, but what went well, sometimes like totally shifts everything. Like even if I still want to be grumpy because something bad happened, that's fine. But taking a few minutes to shift your brain out of that and be like, okay, but I did do this good thing. Or, Allie did bring me chocolate, so that was great. Like taking those few things to be grateful for does actually create new neural connections. And when you start creating those connections, and at the beginning, if you're not used to practicing gratitude, it's going to be really hard for you to come up with things. So even if you're coming up with like, I had a car to drive, I have like a nice roof, over my head, like I have running water, those things are all creating new neural pathways in your brain, which is going to start rewiring your brain to constantly look for those good things. So even when things are going bad, like you've had a horrible work day, your brain can still find those little things that you can be grateful for. And that is going to overall create, more happiness and joy within your life. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is mindfulness. So that is really just allowing yourself to be calm and present in this moment. I used to not understand meditation, and now I love meditation. It's basically practicing your concentration muscles. We are in an instant world. Like everything we do is instantaneous. I order things on Amazon and it shows up. We expect things to be immediate, but that's not how things tend to work in real life. And practicing meditation really helps keep that calmness and helps you be able to concentrate on things for a lot longer, which is really helpful in work and all other aspects of your life when you're able to concentrate and focus on things and not get frustrated when it's not instantaneous. So I do use the Calm meditation app, which has great like 10-minute guided meditations. And then at work, if I'm having a really stressful day, my absolute favorite meditation is my hand washing meditation. So basically what you're going to do is when you wash your hands, so if you've had like a really stressful patient situation, like your patient's really critical and you need to be able to focus, maybe you can't go to break, but you need to recharge for 30 seconds. You're going to wash your hands and you're literally going to take 3 deep breaths and you're going to concentrate on the sensation of the soap or the hand sanitizer on your hands. And you are going to like in detail, like you are like feeling your fingerprints in detail, concentrate on your hands while deep breathing for that 30 seconds for washing your hands or whenever the hand sanitizer dries. And then, go about your day. And honestly, that is like the best brain restart button I have tried at work. Like it takes no time at all and you have to wash your hands anyway, but it is so effective because then your brain is like restarted and then now I can look with a clear mind to see, okay, what do I need to do next to help this patient? So that is a huge one for me. And I kind of already talked about this with meditation, but results are instantaneous. There's so many things in our life, like all of these practices that are so easy to do, but they're so easy not to do. And when you take the time to actually do them, they do improve your life, but it's not instantaneous. A lot of this takes practice. And I want to you to picture this old-fashioned well. You are doing all of this work. So if you implemented 1 or 2 of these practices and you keep doing them, you are pumping the well and pumping the well and pumping the well. And it's going to take time before you notice any results. And maybe there'll be a few drops of water in the bucket, but after time, you're going to have lots of water flowing, but it takes that underground work before you see any of the results. And a lot of the time, because we're doing it slowly, we don't notice the results. It's when somebody else comes up to you and is like, holy crap, did something change with you? Like, what's different? That's like when you actually have like hit the the water's flowing results. So things in life are not instantaneous, and taking the time to do them to improve your life is worth it. So any questions? I'm gonna exit the screen share so I can actually see everybody. No. Okay. You're gonna take one thing away. What would it be? What's one thing you can implement into your life? Because that's how our brains work. Like our brains work on creating habits, but it takes 40 to 60 days to create a new habit. So taking like one thing at a time and implementing that and then doing the next thing is going to be like, because if you try to do everything all at once, we just get overwhelmed and then go right back to where we started and it doesn't change. So if there was one thing, what would be your one thing?
I liked your hand hygiene thingy, meditation thingy.
Honestly, that's amazing. I've been doing that one for like a year and it is so helpful. If you have like a really sick patient and you haven't eaten in like 6 hours and you're like, okay, I need to think clearly, but my brain is not working. Hand hygiene.
We looked like we would just cry in the med room, but then they installed a camera and yeah.
Oh no. Okay, well.
Neil says ditto.
Ditto. All right, I'm glad. That honestly, that mindful hand washing thing has been wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming. You all know where to find me. I do one-to-one coaching, and then I've been doing these webinars at HHS, but they apparently don't know how to do technology. So it's been a struggle because the health and wellness department doesn't understand Zoom. I've been trying to educate them. So we shall see. Hopefully I will be back up and running soon. Alrighty, guys. I hope you have a fantastic Monday evening. It was good to see you.